Right. Good afternoon, one and all. Welcome to this lunchtime webinar on managing common repairs. My name's Stephen Kelly. I'm one of the education and training officers with Under One Roof. We've also got in attendance Sheila Fitzpatrick from Landlord Registration of East Lothian Council, and my colleague Rebecca Grant is in the background doing the comms, keeping me right and twirling about with things and making sure I don't go off track. The rules for today is I will do hopefully a quickish presentation on managing common repairs through the slides. If you have any questions, could I ask if you put them in the chat box at the top, because I can't multitask, I can't do presentation and answer questions at the same time. And we believe over a lot of time at the end of it for you to ask your questions. Okay, so we'll try and get these slides up and going. Let's see, share. Okay. No, sorry. Hold on. No, I don't want to do that. Sorry, I'm just talking to my screen here. It's an old senior thing. Right, so hopefully you can see the slides. And I say we'll go through them as quickly as we can. Right, okay. Just one, I've got two monitors here in case you wonder if I'm going there. I squint my, I'm just going this way and that way. So the first slide is our homepage. So if you go onto underoneroof.scot, this is a homepage you will find with the banner at the top with lots of things up there like information, maintenance, management, events, retrofit, about us. Probably most important link on that top page is the box that said ask an expert, and that's for any questions or inquiries you may have, because there's a lot of information on that website you might not understand, or maybe it's too much information for you to tackle. Please use the ask the expert box. We don't ask for any names, no pack drill. It's simply your email address, who you are you an owner, a landlord, a housing official, and what local authority you come from. The reason we ask for the local authorities, we can then go back at the end of the financial year and say to East Lothian, we help so many people over the course of the year, can you give us some money? Simply that. And you put in your inquiry in the box below, and we will get back to you with a detailed reply, hopefully within 2 to 3 days. If it's going to take any longer than that, it's a bit more complicated, your inquiry, we should give you a holding reply and then contact people who are more intelligent than me and able to answer your question. Okay. So there may well be people sitting here who may think that Tenement Scotland Act does not relate to them. Well, it does if you stay in a cottage flat or a 4 in a block, for those in the housing background, converted villa, or a high-rise multi-storey flat. So the Tenement Scotland Act 2004 expanded the remit of the legislation to cover these type of properties. So in addition to what we call normal sandstone tenements, be it red sandstone in Glasgow, Edinburgh, or the granite properties in Aberdeen, these other type of properties come under the Tenement Scotland Act 2004. Okay. So why we're under one roof created, and why are we still here discussing webinars and presenting webinars for owners and landlords? The reason of that is there's problems with housing stock. We probably know it. We can see it when we walk up main streets or side streets, whatever it is. So in 2023, Scottish Housing Conditions Survey was carried out. There was one done last year, but it wasn't as in-depth as the one in 2023, where they came up with a figure of 2.7 million homes in Scotland, and about 900,000 of them were classed as tenements. Unfortunately, many of those tenements are what they would call poor condition, and this means that it's in critical disrepair, or it could be termed dangerous. So out of those 900,000 tenements, about a fifth of them were classed with urgent disrepair to critical elements. And as I say on the slide, the critical elements refer to the roofs, the walls, the windows, and external doors. So we can all walk along the streets and look at buildings that need a bit of tender loving care, and they were probably classed as under urgent disrepair to the critical elements. However, a wee curveball in the Scottish Conditions Survey of 2023 was that they added another 200,000 properties onto those figures and classed them as below tolerable standard. Now, the reason they were classed as below tolerable standard was that they did not have smoke alarms or carbon monoxide detectors. Obviously, very important items for a property, but it's not what I would have classed as below tolerable standard. I'm old enough and stupid enough to have worked in housing in Glasgow, and I know what a below tolerable standard building looks like. And it may well be structurally sound, but they are classing homes that don't have a smoke alarm or a carbon monoxide detector as a property that's below tolerable standard. As I say, it's an important issue, but it's not what I would maybe technically classed as below tolerable standard. Another one that crops up that we want to make owners aware of is, unfortunately, things fall off buildings. Now, if things fall off buildings, it could hurt somebody. Unfortunately, there's been no major incidents in probably the early 2000s when, unfortunately, an Australian student got hit in the head by a bit of masonry falling from a building, and unfortunately she died. So it's a very important thing, and I did a Freedom of Information request to all local authorities last year, and there was over 2,000 incidents recorded by local authorities. Now, that doesn't mean things have fallen off buildings. It may well simply be a line that's went in to say we'd storm damaged our building last week, whatever it was, but it could be gutters hanging off, loose tiles, chimneys, all those important things, and we don't really want them to fall onto the street. One, it can cause a danger to life, but as an owner, if something falls off your building and hits something, it could be somebody's pride and joy, the Renault Clio for talking sake. If something happens to their car, then they're coming to chat the door of that tenement and put a claim against you. So, obviously, from a danger to life, we want people to check the buildings, but from a financial perspective, it may well hurt the owners as well. Okay, so it's a vital thing that we always ask owners and landlords, when you're coming home from work or you're coming home from the shops or wherever you've been, have a look at your building. See if anything stands out that might cause a problem and get it tackled as soon as you can. Okay. However, why do owners not carry out repairs? I've got 5 issues here that I think could be relevant in the fact that owners don't do repairs. One could simply be they don't know they've got to do it. They may well have saved up all their hard-earned cash and bought their flat, their pride and joy, but haven't been made aware the fact they are responsible for some common repairs and maintenance within that tenement block. You know, they might well have been given the title deeds from their solicitor and they've not read them, or they put them in the bottom drawer, or the solicitor's not made them aware of it. Solicitors basically said, okay, give us your money, thank you, see you later. So they've maybe not been aware of their responsibilities for common repairs and maintenance. I always think it'd be a good idea for developers and solicitors and probably property factors to give their owners, I'll call it an idiot's guide. I'm an idiot, a simple 2-page bit of paper that says this is what you're responsible for, and this is what the factory is responsible for, or the local authority. They make them aware of their responsibilities. However, even if they are aware of their responsibilities for the common repairs, they might not know how to get it done. They might not know who's responsible for what particular repair and how to get the work done. You know, are they just going to go yellow pages and try to get the work done? Are they going to pay for it when other people have got to pay a share for certain jobs? So that's part of the reason we're here today, but there will be a lack of knowledge on how to tackle repairs and get the work done. However, a big thing that's kicked in over the last few years is the cost of repairs from contractors. And in my opinion, it's due to 2 things. One being Brexit, where material costs and supply costs have increased significantly. And then you've got COVID that kicked in 2020. So you may well find contractors who didn't work for a year are now trying to recoup their losses. So it used to be maybe £50 an hour for labour costs. That might be double. That might be up to £100. So they're trying to recover their losses. So if you add that together, material costs have increased and the labour costs have increased, then if you ask for estimates and tenders, you might find they're a bit excessive than what they used to be. And allied to that is the cost of repairs have been up from contractors. People's disposable income has reduced through the cost of living, the energy prices, shopping, all those things are getting dearer. So it's yin and yang. You want to get a job done. I've got so much to pay for that job, but you find the cost of repairs, you can't afford the cost of repairs. Okay. And a big thing that's come in since the scheme of assistance got introduced is there's now a lack of funding sources out there from local authorities and Scottish Government. There's still certain things out there, but it's not, I was going to say the good old days, where councils gave grants and people got work done. We know the councils could not continue to do that, but it may be something the Scottish Government have to look at is trying to get more funding available to get repairs. Because if people can't afford repairs, somebody's got to pay for it, unless the building falls down. And then somebody's going to pick up the tab for that as well. So as I say, owners may well genuinely want to do repairs, but there's probably reasons why they won't be able to do those repairs. Okay. Insurance. I get lots of inquiries, and I don't like insurance inquiries, or chimney inquiries for that matter. But anyway, insurance, I wasn't 100% sure about insurance. It was on our website, but we did have a webinar in February this year, provided by one of our surveyor friends and insurance company, insurance broker. But basically, we are saying that everybody should have insurance for their property. In fact, the Tenement Scotland Act 2004 made it, or obliged by law, to have sufficient insurance to reinstate your building. Obviously, I mentioned a major fire or extensive damage, which brings us back to the example of Perth 2 years ago, where there was a major fire. Unfortunately, a couple of people died. They've all been moved out of the property, and they all want to move back into the property and get it rebuilt. Downside to that is only 4 out of 8 had insurance. The other 4 didn't have any insurance. Not even enough insurance. They just didn't have insurance. So I don't know what they will be doing to get that building rebuilt. I suspect they're going to have to cut their losses and sell the property and then try and find other accommodation. So, but what we're saying is owners should have a building reinstatement value carried out probably by a surveyor every 3 to 5 years to keep up with insurance costs. But the interesting thing that people should be made aware of, the reinstatement value could be more than what you paid for the house. So you may well have bought a house on the market rate at £200,000. But if you get a surveyor in, you might find the reinstatement value is more than that. And that's what your insurance should cover, is the reinstatement value, not what you paid for the house. As I say there, if the cover's inadequate, the insurance company might just pay what you've covered for. So if your house is worth £200,000, but you should have insured it for £300,000, they may only pay out 2/3 of your claim. Now that's up to the insurance company. It depends what they're going to cover you for and what they're going to pay out on any claim. But as I say, that's just an example of what can happen. Again, insurance, if you're getting building insurance, you cover all parts of the building, not just inside the building, but it could be outside, it could be bin shelters, slabbing, all those areas that might affect a building. Mortgage lenders nowadays expect you to cover their investment, and they will want to maybe on occasions be put on the title as an owner until you clear the mortgage, and that's really to ensure that adequate insurance is in place. And again, bottom line, if you don't have insurance, you may have to pay the cost of any damage, even if it's not your fault. Right. Obvious slide, should be straightforward. Maintenance obligations by owners and landlords. Anything inside the house is individual responsibility. Although we will still get the odd inquiry about windows to say the fault of the windows actually outside the window, so therefore could it be a common repair? But generally speaking, most times windows, walls, doors are inside the property, therefore it's an individual's responsibility. Common repairs, the usual suspects: roofs, gutters, chimneys, drainage, walls, windows, coats and stairs. So that's what classified as a common repair, where people will have to pay a share of the repair for that particular job. And basically, as I could have said earlier, if you're buying a tenement flat, wherever it is, the chances are you're going to have to pay something towards a common repair. Unless you're really lucky, or you're only there for a couple of years, there'll be somebody chapping your door somewhere along the line saying, right, you owe us X as a share of a drainage repair or a window repair to common windows. However, the other thing that crops up in maintenance obligations is mutual repairs. And these are repairs that are common but are not shared between all owners. And examples are on the next slide. There you go. So mutual repairs, you need to check the title to see what is classed as a mutual repair and what's a common repair. I've put a drawing in there, it might help. I can see it okay, but I know it is. Where you've got a drain pipe coming down one side of the building. So generally speaking, that the people that pay for the damage to that repair, or to the drain pipe, should I say, are only those that stay in that side of the building, because that could be the people that stay in 01112122, because that drain pipe services their flat. The people on the other side of the close don't have to pay for that because there's not an issue there and they aren't serviced by that drain pipe. Okay. Adjoining buildings, using the example of drain pipes as well, you could have a building, pardon me, where you've got a drain pipe going down the middle of a building, but actually services two closes. So you could have 7 Main Street and 9 Main Street, the drain pipe going down the middle of it, and that services flats 01112122, and the other side could be 021222, 32, whatever it is. Basically, they would have to split that 8 ways. Okay, they would have to get together and decide what the problem is and split it 8 ways. But generally speaking, if it's just affecting one side of the closing, it's only those 4 owners that would be responsible for paying for the shared repair. The closing the stairs one is an interesting one. You may well be aware of main door flats that are attached to tenement buildings. They are not responsible for any common costs unless they've got access to the stair. So they may well get a main door to their property and they may well have a side entrance into the close. If they do, then they would be responsible for paying their share of any repairs to the closing stairs. And that could be stair nosings, could be the banisters, it could be the cold painting of it, whatever comes under that for repairs. They may well have access to the back court. So they don't have access to the close, but have access to the back court, they'd be responsible for paying their share of repair if you're repairing a bin shelter, for talk's sake. Okay. But the bottom line for mutual repairs is you have to really look at your titles and see what parts of that are classified as mutual responsibility. Okay. Obviously, another one that crops up regularly is commercial properties. The bottom line for commercial properties, be that shops or offices, is that the owner of that shop or commercial premises is responsible for the repairs. It's not the person who's let the property out. They'll have a different repairing and lease arrangement with the owner. It is the owner who's responsible for the repair of the property. So the first thing you have to do is check the titles. What does it say about the shop share? If there's gaps in the titles, which will come on to when we look at legislation, then you refer to the tenement management scheme. Okay. Now, unfortunately, shop share can be based on rateable value, which went out the window in the 1980s, but it's not been changed. And the shop share may well be a bigger percentage of the costs. Now, that'll be when the rateable value was introduced, that main streets were busy. That's where people went for their shopping, got their hair cut, had their food in the main street. Unfortunately, people now go out of town to do that. But the theory being that the shop in the main street was busy, therefore they're making more money, and therefore they should be entitled to pay a bigger percentage of any common repairs. Those days have passed, but the rateable value figure has not been changed. So what you can do as owners, and we're not saying this, everybody does it, we know it's done in the past, depending on the importance of the repair you want done, you can negotiate with the shop owner and consider a one-off arrangement to reduce costs. So if the shop owner has to pay 60% and is adamant they not want to do that or can't afford it, you could hold a meeting, speak to the owners and try and reduce their share just to get the work done. Okay. As I say, we're not recommending you do that. We just know historically through our inquiries and through our events, that has happened. But if you are doing that, you should always use proper procedures. And again, I'll come on to that in the future slides. Looking for shop owners. I've got a link there to the Scottish Assessor's website. It's not always easy to find the shop owner through that website, but it's a starting point for you. Okay. There we go. Relevant legislation. So, relevant legislation is what has to be used when you're looking to carry out repairs. Simple. The first one is your titles and your deed of conditions. So, the titles will be it depends when you bought your property. You may well stay in a property that's been built in the 1800s, and you might just only have a Sassin register, which is just a document. And the document basically says, I bought the house whenever, I then sold it to Rebecca Grant, who moved in, whatever, and then Sheila Fitzpatrick moved in a few years after that. There's no real rules and regulations attached to the Sassin register. You may well also have maybe titles that were created pre-1919 properties. Again, there might only be 4 or 5 pages. The more up-to-date ones will be like War and Peace, where you maybe get 4 or 5 pages of the address, a map, who your name is, when you bought the property, do you have a mortgage on it, etc., etc. But the most important part of that for the titles is the real burdens, which is at the back of that. So if you've got real burdens attached to your titles, that will provide you with rules for the management and maintenance of the building. Okay, as it says, what parts of building are commonly owned, which are mutual, who's responsible for what, and how to make decisions regarding maintenance and divide the costs. So if everything's included in your titles, and more particularly the real burdens part of your titles, they must be followed. They are gospel. You can't change that. Okay. Well, you can change your titles, but it's a lot of money, and there's no guarantees it's going to be successful, because people might come in and go back out and go, I want the titles changed again. So it's a lot of money. The only person making money for that is the solicitor. But if all areas are mentioned in titles, then they must be followed. However, as I say, buildings have been built through the course of centuries. So you may find certain titles don't cover all the bases. They don't mention all the common parts. They don't mention the mutual repairs, or they don't mention who's got to pay for what. If there is something missing, and the solicitors that we know call gaps in the titles, or they're silent or unworkable, the unworkable thing is when it comes to shared costs. It's one of those things. I don't think I've got a shared cost slide in here. Lucky for you. Keep you here all day talking about it. As a shared cost, if somebody stays in a flat 1.5 times bigger than the smaller flat, then technically speaking, you have to measure all the flats, add it all together, take away the figure you first thought of, and that should add up 100%. Unfortunately, you can imagine, sometimes they don't. So if they're unworkable, for example, we've had inquiries where the shared costs have come at 103% or 97.8%. That's not workable. So therefore, people can default to the Tenement Management Scheme, which was introduced in the Tenement Scotland Act 2004, which should make it easier to manage repairs to your building. It will let you know what areas of the building are common, what counts as maintenance, how you should come to agreements about those repairs, and how you can split the costs. Okay. The major thing that was changed in the 2004 Act was that unless the titles say otherwise, you may have titles that say that the 2 top flats are responsible for the roof. If it doesn't say that, then the 2004 Act makes it clear that the roof is now a shared responsibility, even if you're on the ground floor of that property. Okay. So that's the big difference that the Tenement Management Scheme introduced. So if your titles are clear in all areas and covered, and it lets you know how to go about getting repairs, they must be followed. If there's something missing or they don't work, you can then default to the Tenement Management Scheme. So once you've decided you're going to carry out works, once you've all got together and got, we need to do some repairs, we need it. We need some tender loving care of building. The first thing before you look at decision making is to trace owners and landlords. You may find the absentee landlord, or a property might be empty and you don't know who owns it. The reason you need this, as I say, we'll come on to proper procedures on the next slide, is you need to do things properly to make sure people cannot appeal against that. So if you're looking for a property that's you think's occupied, but you don't know who the owner is, you could contact Register of Scotland. If you're looking for a private landlord, you might contact the local authority landlord registration team, or you can contact the Scottish Landlord Register. If you suspect a property's been empty for a while and you don't know why, again, your local authority may have an empty homes officer, or you can contact the Scottish Empty Homes Partnership. Shop owners we've talked about. You can maybe contact local authority and see who's responsible for paying the council tax. They will not give you that person's details, but they may well be able to contact that person and let them know the owners of a block are looking for them. Or we're now in the social media page. You might find the person's details through Facebook, Instagram, there are other things available on social media. Or last resort, you could use a sheriff officer, private detective. That's going to cost you money, but you may say it's worthwhile. So once you've got the details of the owners, then you can go through the decision-making process. And you must use proper procedures, or we recommend you use proper procedures, because if you don't use that, an owner can appeal against any decision. So I might be the bad apple in your tenement block and I don't want to pay for repairs. But if you don't use proper procedures, like holding a meeting, invite me to the meeting, let me know what the meeting's about, what the purpose is, what the agenda, minutes and decisions are doing. I can just stick my head in the sand and say, don't know anything about it, what you billing me for £1,000, nothing to do with me. Now, the chances are you may well get your money back, but we don't guarantee your money back if you follow these procedures. So all those that worked in business will understand that everything's got to be agreed in writing. Purpose, agenda, minute, decisions, action points, who's doing what, who's getting the tenders, who's going to go to another meeting, when we're going to go forward with it. Provide support and documentation. That could be photos, quotes from contractors. And if you do agree a decision to go ahead and re-roof the property, for talking's sake, all owners should be made aware of the next steps in the process. In terms of voting, 1 vote per flat. Irrespective of many people stay in that flat, it could be husband and wife, 3 daughters, it's still 1 vote per flat. If you wish, an owner can nominate another person, could be a letting agent, a factor, could be a friend of the family. They can vote on their behalf, still 1 vote per flat. And if you've used proper procedures and carried out a proper vote, then that decision is binding on all other owners. So if I say I'm invited to the meeting as a bad apple and I don't bother turning up, but you can prove I was invited and I've just stuck my head in the sand, and you have a proper vote, then a majority decision is required to proceed, unless I say the title say otherwise. But generally speaking, if you're using the tenement management scheme, 8 people turn up at the meeting, 5 vote in favour, 3 vote against, the majority decision holds sway, and they can go ahead, get the work arranged. Okay, and I say if I don't turn up for whatever reason, hope it goes away and they won't come and hurt me, then the decision is still binding on me if everybody else has turned up. Fortunately, a tied decision, and I've got 4 out of 8, it could be 3 out of 6, it could be 6 out of 12, is not a majority decision, and the work cannot proceed per the Tenement Management Scheme. However, the Tenement Scotland Act allowed work to proceed, and they cover it under enforcing repairs. So there is something in the Tenement Scotland Act that talks about duty to maintain. So every owner has a duty to maintain part of the tenement that provides support and shelter. For those from a housing background myself, you're talking wind and water tight. Provide support and shelter. Now, most of these jobs will probably revolve around the roof of the property. So if somebody at the top floor flat and the titles do not say they're responsible for it, it's all their fellow owners have to pay their share, they can go ahead and do the work and then bill their neighbours for their cost of that work. Okay. Fortunately, there's no obligation on other owners to pay up front, but if they're responsible, they're expected to pay at the end of the day. Same as for emergency repairs. I say it could be water ingress, it could be damage to the building, it could be health and safety, it could be dirty water coming into somebody's flat. and you have to get that sort of sorted out sooner rather than later. It's a fine piece of legislation. Disadvantage to it is twofold. One, the owner that's affected has to fund it themselves, unless other owners are willing to play ball. And two, you'll have disagreements, and we've had it recently over inquiries, where people don't agree with the person in the top floor flat that the water ingress into their property justifies duty to maintain or emergency repair. They're adamant it's not an emergency. Now, it's no affecting them, but then you've got to get a sheriff to make a decision on whether that water ingress justifies duty to maintain or emergency repairs. So as I say, it's a vital and important piece of legislation. There is disadvantages to it, in my humble opinion. Okay. So, again, you've decided you're going to go ahead with the work. You've held your meeting. You've had your votes. You've then got to get contractors to give you prices. So there's lots of things on our website about contractors, but for this purpose, I've just narrowed it into 4 for finding contractors. Check your local authority. They may well have a trusted trader scheme. If not, you can check Scottish Trading Standards, Buy with Confidence, Trustmark. There's other websites out there. checkatrade.com, Find a Builder or My Builder. There's websites you can check. What I wouldn't advise you to do is maybe check Yellow Pages, because myself and Rebecca could start a plumbing company today and we don't know one end for a U-bend to the other, because Yellow Pages don't sort of check. A lot of these websites I'm talking about will have comments about how good or bad the tradesman was. Now, whether you believe these comments or whether they're all fabricated, I don't know. But they've got to pay to join these websites, so there may be a beneficial of checking there to get good contractors. Again, on top of that, you can do your own checks on a contractor, do their public liability, have a health and safety policy. What experience do they have for the work you want to do? Are they a jack of all trades or a master of none? You know, are they an all? There's lots of companies wanting about driving out of vans got I'm all trades, but they don't have to tell you what their actual skill set is. Are they a plumber? Are they a joiner? Can they turn the hand to electrical work? Which I wouldn't want anybody to trust me electrical work unless they're a qualified electrician. And if you're doing major works, is a guarantee or a warranty provided. If you are doing tender, please include everything you want done in the specification. We had an inquiry a few months ago where somebody was complaining the contractor hadn't finished the job because they hadn't painted the close. And I said, did you ask me to paint the close? No, I just thought they would carry on and do it. So please make sure that if you are doing it yourself, everything's clearly stated in the specification. We would always recommend you get at least 2 tender prices. We know that's getting harder because a lot of people aren't willing to tender for jobs unless they're guaranteed to get it. We, in an ideal world, we'd actually ask you to get 3 tender prices, but again, we know it's difficult, is try to get at least 2 tender prices and make sure they're all signing for the same hymn sheet. Final selection should not be on price alone. In another life, I'm a board member of a housing association, and we tender for a ground maintenance contract, and somebody came in about £1,000 cheaper, and when we queried it, they'd missed out 2 streets. They didn't know we did the terrace and the circus, so one of those things. But don't just look at the price. Make sure they've covered all the things you're asking for. You can have a checklist created and tick off the prices against each particular checklist for it. And we'd always recommend you agree project management issues, start date, progress reports. We would always recommend you put contingency costs in because they don't know what they're going to find till they start stripping back the roof, for tall's sake. When I worked in cairn repair, we did disabled adaptations to take out a bath and put in a wet flow shower area. It was amazing how many times that once they took the bath out, they found there's wet rot, dry rot, so additional costs were added on. And decide to say who's going to manage the contract during the course of it and when you expect the work to get done. Okay. So paying for repairs is also a vital thing. If owners are responsible for their share of the repair, they must pay. Okay, and that includes owners, landlords, and shop owners. Okay, what we could maybe do is you obviously look at your local authority. As far as East Lothian is concerned, they don't have a mission share scheme or discretionary repairs grants at the moment, but they do have grants that are provided by Historic Environment Scotland. Owners should be looking at building up their own savings pot, or they could consider joining a credit union. They could look at borrowing to pay their share of the repairs, either through a commercial loan or they may have equity available on the property. Again, we're not recommending that. We would just say if you are considering that, always take financial advice. Or you could try opening out a joint maintenance account or a building reserve fund. Stick money away for a rainy day. That might help. It's not going to pay the total cost of the work, but it might help if you're looking after the building to help soften the blow when you get the bill through your door. There's other things you can do. Speak to your family and friends. Their interest rates might be higher than the banks, but who knows? If somebody's unable to pay their share and they make you aware we can't pay your share, then we'd advise you to tell them to contact Citizens Advice or the Money Advice Centre, financial advice and support. As I say, as part of the Housing Association Board, one of our older tenants was struggling to pay her rent, but we got her some welfare benefit advice and they managed to get her £9,000 that she was entitled to. Now, it's just a generation who didn't want to ask for help and didn't apply for pension credit or tenants allowance. All those things are out there for older people. So she managed to get £9,000 and managed to pay her rent. So there's things out there under the benefit system that people might be able to get some financial advice and support on. However, there'll be those like me, stick my head in the sand, I'm not paying for my repair. If you've done proper procedures, then probably don't have a leg to stand on. But you could proceed to instruct the repair, pay the contractor, and then bill that person for their share. Or you could raise legal action in the sheriff court if you've done it properly. You have the simple procedure for anything that's owed below £5,000. Only costs you £22 or £123, that's it. Okay, if it's over £300. It's a play on words. A simple procedure is not a simple procedure. Like any court case, you're going to have to provide evidence that you did hold the meeting. Everybody was invited to the meeting. You had a proper vote and it was recorded. And then you're relying on the sheriff to vote in your favour. If it's something over £5,000, you're probably going to need a solicitor to help you through the ordinary clause procedure. Or depending what the bill is, you could just bite the bullet, split the bill between the owners willing to pay, divide by 7 rather than 8. I mean, it could be every share's £1,000. If you split that by 7, it's £170. Not ideal. It's going to stick in your craw, but it might be cheaper doing that than going to court for it and the fees it may be added on to it, because there's no guarantee you're going to be successful in your court case. Okay. The other things you could consider doing is registering a notice of potential liability, and this is when work is agreed that owners can register a notice of potential liability on the property via Register of Scotland. I think it costs £80. It may have to be updated every few months, but it means when that person sells their house, they're going to have to pay you money back for what they're due for that property. Sometimes happens when work's agreed and the person says, well, I'm not paying, I'm going to sell my house. So you can issue a notice of potential liability, which means that you'll get the money back either from the person that's selling or the new owner. But it's something that property factors use quite regularly, and it's something you could consider doing if you've got a bad apple in your block. For the factors, just a couple of slides. You may not have factors in East Lothian, but speaking to Sheila earlier, there's a lot of new developments getting built in the East Lothian area. Who may have factors appointed on their behalf, on the developer's behalf. So what we're basically saying here is to make people aware, if they've got a factor, it's a law of agency. There's an agreement between the owner and the factor, but it's the owner's responsibility to carry out or to maintain the common parts of the building. It's not the factor's responsibility. The factor works on behalf of the owners. Okay, factors must understand and comply with legislation that's out there, provide services, manage owners' finances properly. So that is based at least 2 separate bank accounts, one for their own funds and one for owners' funds. Okay, and they should understand the financial and legal matters as a factor and provide a one-stop shop thing. But interestingly, the property factor are governed by the Property Factor Scotland Act. So everybody who is saying they're a factor in Scotland, they must be registered on the property register. They must adhere to a code of conduct and provide a written statement of service. And if you're not happy with the factor's performance, you can complain against them. And once you've used their complaints policy, you can then forward up to the first tier tribunal, who can then issue a property factor enforcement order or charge the factor accordingly. I do know of one case that went to court or to the first tier tribunal, essentially, and the owner got £5,000 back, just because the factor was just useless, basically. Bottom line. But if you have got a factor, the most important thing you should check is your written statement of service. The code of conduct covers 6 big areas, but the written statement of service is how they're going to deliver the services for the owners. So if you do have a factor and you've got issues with it, first point of call is to check your written statement of service, see what it says in terms of authority to act, who appointed them, what say do they have in arranging repairs, have they agreed a cost threshold with the owners, what are they going to provide, how are they going to communicate with you, when are they going to bill you. I mean, there's a factor in Glasgow we did training for last year, and they billed people in July and Christmas, December, and then were worried or discovered that people weren't paying them at that point, which is holiday time and Christmas time. So with our help, they managed to change that into quarterly. So it's now February, May, whatever, but there's more likelihood of them getting their bills paid rather than issuing them when people are in Mallorca or going to see Santa. Debt recovery policy is something that's vital for factors. Bottom line is if people don't pay their bills, depending what the titles say, other owners may have to pick up their share. They can maybe offer you common building insurance, procedures for repairs, complaints policy, any declaration of interest. And in the small print, how to end the arrangement. Because factors don't like getting sacked. But you can, in the written statement itself, should let you know how you can do that. Okay. Nearly finished. This is something you may have heard of, may be aware of, it may be new to you. But Awab's law, which was introduced, unfortunately, to the death of the child Awab in Rochdale a couple of years ago. So they're introducing in Scottish Parliament the target date of the 6th of October 2026. And basically what they're saying is the landlord has a legal obligation to investigate and resolve damp complaints. So if you get a complaint in for one of your tenants, you've got 10 working days to go and visit them to see what's causing the problem. Now, I'm not saying it's structural. It could be how they're living their lifestyle. They maybe not opening the windows, etc., etc. We've got 10 days to inspect that property. In fact, we're doing a training session under one roof with East Lothian Council in a couple of weeks on damp and mould, which might cover this in more detail. But basically, they're saying 10 days to do that. You've then got to give them a written summary of what your findings are within 3 days of that investigation and carry out the necessary works within 5 working days. Which in my eyes, 10 and 3 and 5 is like less than 4 weeks. I'm not sure that's achievable, but that's what the law is saying at the moment. Another piece of legislation, again, we're doing a webinar on this. The 2nd of July, I told this month, about mandatory owners associations. They say a week's a long time in politics. Well, the Tenement Maintenance Working Group was established in 2018, and in 2024, they came up with 3 solutions to try and improve tenement properties. One was to get properties inspected every 5 years by law. One was building reserve funds, which there's a paper being done on it, but it's not really went anywhere after that. But one paper it did was to have mandatory owners associations established in every flat or every building that is deemed as a tenement. And that is currently with probably the housing minister at the moment. What they're doing about it, I don't know. My personal opinion about a lot of amendments to it, but the key points are they're saying that every tenement must have an owners association. Every flat owner must be a member. You can appoint a manager, and that could be somebody within the block. It doesn't have to be a factor. You have to appoint somebody who can manage the business of that building and provide an annual budget and have an annual meeting. I say in a previous life I was a factor, don't hold it against me, and we did hold meetings with owners to discuss a potential annual budget, and then the annual meeting we followed on with that a year later to see how we'd spent the money. So it is achievable. I think there were a lot of amendments to it, but I say it is with the Scottish Government at the moment. So, nearly finished. My Martin Luther King slide is proactive steps. As I say, look after your building, check all owners of building insurance, carry out regular inspections. I say it could be coming back for the shop, coming back for your work, coming off your car, the bus, the train. Have a look at your building. We would always recommend you get the gutters cleaned and the roof checked annually. In fact, I've just an inquiry last week from somebody who made a claim about faulty roof, and they're claiming the insurance company saying it's wear and tear because you didn't check your roof. Obviously, we talked about establishing owners association, prepare a planned maintenance schedule, get your building surveyed, safe for future repairs, and if your building is factored, liaise with your factor. Shake hands across the water, whatever the phrase is, speak with your factor. But bottom line is regular inspections of the common areas, followed by remedial works, will save you money in the long term. As I say, if you stay in a tenement flat, the chance of that you're going to have to pay something somewhere along the line. So, second last slide, how can we help? Please check the website. There's useful information on our website. There's a repair checker. We've got Ask the Expert thing I touched on at the start. You can subscribe for the monthly e-newsletter, which is free. So that'll include flavour of the month, any legislation, any query of the month that we think might be useful for people. And we've also got a YouTube channel, which you can look at the YouTube channel and see some previous webinars. You can ignore the one with Magly face in it, but there's other ones out there. Say the insurance one, we've done a previous one on damp and mold. So, but please use the YouTube channel because everything will appear on that. And there's the website and the email address. As I say, at the end of this presentation, you will receive a recording of this presentation and a copy of the slides. Okay. And last but not least, if you've got your phone, you can use the QR code. If not, as I say, we a copy of the slides anyway, where you can click on that link and answer some questions and feedback. So thank you for listening, and I'll stop sharing and we'll see if there's any questions. We'll present.
Hi, Stephen. We haven't got any questions in the chat box at the moment, but I submitted one.
Okay, of course. Sorry.
Just to get the ball rolling. So earlier on, you mentioned properties which are below tolerable standard. Could you tell us a wee bit more about that and what might make a property below the tolerable standard for renting out?
Basically, use my housing experience. Anything that's not wind and watertight. So that could be problems with the roof. It could be problem with your windows that they're not sealed properly and winds, plus like wind and water that's coming through your property. It could be cracks in your building that need attended to. So the cracks can be wee small hairline cracks. It can be massive cracks that lead to the whole thing. We've all seen buildings where you've a crack at the bottom and it just keeps on going up. So below tolerable standard is basically what they're saying is somebody where shouldn't be staying in it. I mean, I'm old enough to, done previous jobs where I have went into houses where there's been no floorboards in certain rooms and there's been dampness all over the place. So if you were selling your property and it was below tolerable standard, you probably wouldn't be able to sell it. Basically that. But it's problems with the house, inside and outside. And that's probably where they've mentioned the smoke alarms and then carbon monoxide detectors are not placed in the flat. And they've deemed that as below tolerable standard. So it can be a structural issue or it can be something inside. I mean, it may well be, I've been in the houses where there's no floorboards, but there were plans to put floorboards down. Just happened to be when I turned up at that house to discuss the issue with the owner. There was no floorboards. So again, if you're selling your property and somebody's come into your property, probably put them off buying it.
Okay, thank you, Stephen.
Yeah.
Sheila, you work in landlord registration for the council. Do you have any thoughts on below tolerable standard?
Yeah, I mean, the tolerable standard is defined within the legislation, isn't it? So, things like utilities and safety and so on, are obviously included in that as well, which is where I think you're probably getting things like smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors from. But yeah, I mean, I think usually when it's phone calls to the office from neighbours or tenants or occupants or whatever, then it does tend to be more of the kind of bigger things, as Stephen was saying, you know, structural problems, dampness, that sort of thing. But yeah, like I say, both the riparian standards and the tolerable standards are defined in legislation. So if you're failing on one of those, you're failing the tolerable standard.
Great, thank you very much. We've got a question from an attendee here, which is about voting and making decisions. If you have 8 people invited to a meeting, 7 turn up, 4 are in favour of repairs and 3 are against, does that count as a majority?
In my opinion, yes. As long as you have invited people and you can prove they've been invited to the meeting and they've been told what the meeting's about. As I say, doing my presentation, I could be the bad apple, just stick my head in the sand, not interested. Then 4 against 3 is a majority decision. But you should check what the titles say regarding that. But generally speaking, if somebody has been stuck there, somebody doesn't want to contribute or participate and the other people have done, now they could maybe go and appeal. The 3 people who voted against it may well say, oh, we're not happy, he never turned up. They do have, I believe it's 28 days to appeal against any decision, but they would have to go to a sheriff court and appeal that and have to have reasons why they appealed that decision to proceed. And again, a lot of these things when it comes to jobs, people may well stick their head in the sand, but it might be useful to say, okay, we'll tell you what, we'll go and get some quotes, because I've been involved with jobs in previous life where people have said, I'm not paying for that, and they don't even know what they're going to pay for. You know, go back to this Disabled Adaptations Day with care and repair. I can't afford my share, son. You then get a price and go, oh, is that all I've got to pay? Oh, I can pay for that. So people will adamantly say, I can't afford that, with not knowing what you're asking me to do. But if it's 4 against 3, the 3 can appeal against that, okay? But they would have to do that within 28 days by probably going to the sheriff court. But if the 4 in favour can provide proper evidence that they have done it by the book, then they may well win the decision.
That's great, thank you very much. I'm having another wee look through the chat box and Q&A, but I don't think we've got any further questions.
Well, as I say, if you don't want to ask a question now, by all means, feel free to use the Ask the Expert box. You know, if you're away and think, oh, Don, I should ask that question.
Rebecca,
I wasn't sure what he was saying about, or you have a look at the recording and go, he was talking about that. I wasn't sure.
In the Q&A box, there is a question from Marlene.
All right.
I think it's just in response to your question.
Yeah. Marlene asks, if you have an owner who tells you that they are going to get work done at a value of £22,500 due to an emergency with water ingress, can you ask them for evidence? If they go ahead without a vote anyway, as it's an emergency, are you obliged to pay? Is it no meeting, no vote? Oh, there's been no meeting and no vote.
Yeah. Under the emergency repair and duty to maintain, the law allows them to proceed. However, like all those things, what we're saying is we always recommend you get more than one price. So one, you would ask for a copy of the specification for the work and what it's going to involve. Is it a major job worth £22,000 and what your share of that is? Because there may be people who just phone up and go, I want a new roof. That's not a specification, that's just a request. Particularly we're asking other owners to make a share for that. So if you've got an owner who's been under duty to maintain or emergency repairs, I would ask for proof that they believe that it's covered under duty to maintain or emergency repairs and what work is getting done. That the specification or the tender quote should be split into material costs, labour costs, etc. So you're able to look at that, and the tender should also include all that, etc., etc. So I wouldn't just take their say for it. I'm not saying they're lying, but they've obviously got one price. Go, that's fine. I'll just go ahead and do it. They should get at least 2 prices. But then you get in a situation, as I've got a couple of inquiries, where people don't believe it's an emergency. And unfortunately, Under My Roof can't adjudicate on that. that's probably up to solicitors or sheriff officers to decide what is going to get done, or whether it justifies, I should say, emergency repair or not. But I would ask for a copy of the tender and the specification that they've decided they need the work done. Now, obviously, it's causing an emergency. They may well have got the job or got the price in. They should have chapped people's doors, because although it's maybe time, I say the pro procedures that say you should have at least 48 hours. Maybe it wasn't within that period of time, but you still, as good practice, be chapping the doors of your neighbours and say, I've got an issue and I'm making you aware of it. Are you willing to pay your share? And at that stage, you just said, okay, well, I want a couple of prices. Then what's the work involved? You know, it could be a few tiles. Who knows? 22,000 sounds a bit excessive for 2 tiles, but still, it depends what the work's going to involve and what people's share is going to be.
That's very helpful, thank you. Fintan has a follow-up question to his question about voting, which is, he says, the issue where I live is an external balcony. Replacing it's very expensive. What happens if we don't get it repaired?
Hate balconies as well. Sorry, Fintan. It depends what the legislation says. The titles, is it who's responsible for the external balcony? Is it part of that building? When was it installed? Is it a common repair? And who's responsible for that share? And what's the problem with it? You know, is it in danger of falling down? Is it just a crack that needs repaired? You know, has a surveyor looked at it? That sort of thing, I would say. But if you're happy enough, then I say check the titles to see if it says what is a common repair. Because you may find things in our subject I don't like, dormer windows, is when it was installed and who's responsible for the dormer window. Is it the person that owns the property, or is it somebody that installed it? So I would check the titles in it initially, find out whether it is a common repair, then ask maybe a surveyor to look at it to see what their opinion is and what the job that needs done. And once you've done that, then you could have a meeting and decide how you want to progress it or proceed with it or progress it by having a meeting, whatever it is. And again, if you're doing a survey then getting tender prices in, it makes people aware of what their share may well be. Because it might be a big job and it might be a small job.
That's great, thank you, Stephen. I'm taking another wee look through the chat box. I don't think there's anything else in the Q&A. And that's at just 1 o'clock. So thank you very much for answering those questions, Stephen and Sheila.
Well, thank you for listening. Hope it wasn't too boring for you. But as I say, please don't hesitate to use the Ask the Expert box. And if you've signed up for the future webinars, you might see Mugly Mug again. You never know. Or our new start Cat might be up to speed by that time. And she's been with us only a couple of weeks, so she may be keen to do a presentation. So thank you for listening. As I say, I'll probably see you in a couple of weeks' time. Wasn't it, myself?
Thanks very much, Stephen.
Okay, thanks a lot, Sheila. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.